become all that He's created them to do. That's what it's all about. Amen? So, today we start a new series entitled Ghosts of Christmas Past. And I wanted to start off with a little story that happened to me. So, when I was probably 17 or 18, I was still living in my parents' house. If you're still 17 or 18, probably a good place to live. And we were living in Sheffield. Anybody ever been to Sheffield, Vermont? Three or four people have been to Sheffield, Vermont. Anybody know where Sheffield, Vermont is? It's in Vermont. It's north of Lindenville. Some would say that's the real Vermont, that this over here is not necessarily Vermont. Now, some would say that. But anyhow, we had a small farm, and I was working on the farm, and my aunt, who shall remain nameless just in case this gets out. Now, this is a long time ago, right? This is 40 years ago. And she brought a present for my sister and for my mother and father, but not for me. And you know what? It's really interesting that little things like that, because it's really a little thing when I'm this age, looking back on it, well, who cares? But when I was 17 or 16 or however old I was, it's like, what is that all about? I was offended. And it's interesting that I still remember it all these years later. I bet my sister doesn't remember getting a present from her, but I remember not getting a present from her. Anybody relate to stuff like that? Anybody in here got stuff back in their Christmas past that they still carry today? Whether it's family issues or lost loved one issues or stuff that happened during the holidays that just hit you right here. Maybe it didn't happen during the holidays. Maybe it just happened. My goal for this message is that when we leave here, we've dealt with offenses and we start the process at least of forgiving. Because how many of you are planning on getting together with anybody this holiday season? Whether it's family or friends or whoever it is, most of us have some plans to get together. How many of you, you don't have to raise your hand, but how many of you are regretting that or wishing you didn't have to go? Anybody? I mean, don't raise your hands. But some of us have family issues. When we get together, all we do is fight, and it brings up stuff and all this stuff. Some of us will get together, and it'll be awesome. I want to make sure that when we leave here, that no matter who we encounter out there, whether it's family, friends, or anybody else, not just during the Christmas season, but throughout the rest of our lives, that we're holding nothing towards them. That we're letting it go. That we're getting over it. So that's my hope for this message. This whole series, by the way, is the artwork and the genesis of this series came from Life Church out of Oklahoma. Now, I'm not plagiarizing. We have permission to use their material. However, the genesis of it started with them. I want to give them credit. But the rest of the stuff that God has given me, I think, is for us. And I was really searching God's heart for a message series that wasn't just Christmassy, but something that would help us live in the world we live in with the people that are around us. I think theology that's not practical is, how does it impact my life is one of the questions that I ask all the time. And unless I can connect it with my life, I have a hard time connecting with it. How about you? Do you need to know these mystical things, and your life is, what in the world am I doing? Do you need to know that the color purple means this, and these numbers? Those are fun things to know, but they don't affect my life. And I believe that this message series is an opportunity for it to affect our lives. So today we're going to be talking about overcoming offenses. How many of you have offenses? Offenses. How many of you have ever been offended? How many of you have I ever offended? You can raise your hand, that's okay. I know I do it all the time. I don't do it on purpose, by the way. Just so you know, we were talking the other day, and I cannot remember a time since high school that I wanted to hurt someone. I was mean for a while back there in the day. But I don't intend on hurting anybody, but I know I offend people occasionally. And by the way, sometimes you offend me. That's just when you do life together, offenses happen. So we're gonna talk about how to get over those things so we can move forward together. Now, there's the good. Anybody remember Clint Eastwood? The good, the bad, and the ugly? The good, the bad, and the ugly happens in all of our families, happens in all of our lives. There's good things. There's people we want to be around, and there's people we have to be around. Going forward, let's really take time today. And I know I've said this twice already, but I want you to understand that today we're going to get over things. And we're going to make relationships more important than those things. So, that's a good question for you. Are you easily offended? You probably don't know if you are or not. Everybody else does. Well, if you are, this is the truth. Your life is too short and your calling is too big to live offended. How many of you have ever met people who are walking in a place of unforgiveness and bitterness and resentment, and they've done it for so long that you don't want to be around them, nobody wants to be around them, their whole body even shows that they're full of this stuff, they've turned into this mean-looking, kind of reminds me of Gollum from the Lord of the Rings. You know, just this thing starts to eat at you, and before you know it, your face is all wrinkled up, and you're just sourpuss all the time, and unforgiveness will do that to you. It'll eat you from the inside out. It's a cancer to your soul. Your life is too short. The older I get, the more I realize how short life is. I was just with somebody recently who we've known for probably 25 years or so, and they were sharing their salvation story. And this person came to Christ when she was 56. I'm like, I'm 56. And now she's in her mid-70s. And it's like, that was just yesterday. Just yesterday, I was like 30. Just yesterday, I was getting married and having babies, and now we're empty nesting. We love you, but it's okay. They live they live about 300 yards away, so it's okay. But anyhow, my life is short, your life is short, and it's way too short, and my calling, your calling is way too high to live in a place of being offended all the time. It will eat you up from the inside out. And we don't want to live in that place, do we? So, because it's Christmas, I wanted to bring Mary and Joseph into this situation. And I read that story over and over and over again. How many of you are familiar with the story of Joseph and Mary and baby Jesus? That's what Christmas is all about, by the way. It has nothing to do with Santa Claus and elves and lights, and all of this stuff is just for fun. Jesus is the reason for the season. That would have been a good picture. No, I'm not doing it a third time. So get this, right? So I'm reading this over again, and Mary's just doing her thing, and we just watched The Star yesterday. Anybody seen that movie, The Star? It's on Netflix now. Yesterday it was in theater. Last year it was in theaters, and I loved the way they did Mary, because she's just this little girl. You know, she's this 14, 15-year-old little girl. She's not a woman. She's a little girl, by our standards anyhow. So the angel shows up and says, "Hey, Mary, how you doing? You're going to have a baby." And she's like, how am I going to have a baby? I've not yet been with a man. And the angel says, "The Holy Spirit of the living God is going to come upon you, and you're going to have the Messiah." To make a long story short. And then it says, this is awesome, because she says, "Let it be unto me, and as you say," and she didn't argue. She's like, whoa. But then, you know what the next thing she did? It says in the New Living Translation that she quickly left town. Now, in this message about offenses, I can only imagine, and I looked and looked and looked, and I could not find Mary's mother's name. I'm not even sure which, trying to understand the genealogies and stuff, who the father of Mary was, because it depends on who you believe, what's going on. But anyhow, I got to believe that the next thing that she did after the angel left her room was, I bet she went and told Mom, "Mom, guess what? An angel showed up in my room, and I'm going to have a baby." What would your response be? I mean, let's be real. Most of us, as parents at least, would be like, "What kind of drugs are you taking, sweetie?" Now, I don't mean any disrespect, but this is reality. We hear the story so much that we lose the reality. The reality is this teenage girl in a small town. How many of you ever lived in a small town where everybody knows everybody? In a small town, and she finds out she's pregnant by the Holy Spirit, and I'll guarantee you that there was a lot of rumors going on and a lot of things being said to and about Mary. I bet it wasn't all like, oh, that's awesome. The Virgin Mary, sweet Holy Mary, the favor of God is upon her. I'll bet there was very little of that and a lot of, I can't believe that young girl did that. I don't know who the father is. Because especially those religious people. You ever been around those religious people? I can't believe it. She did that. Oh. So she quickly left town. I mean, she was out of town in a shot. And then she stayed away for like 3 months. Because she got to Elizabeth's house, and Elizabeth was in her 6th month. She stayed till after John the Baptist was born. And then she comes home. And then watching the star, I never saw this before either in Scripture. I always assumed that Joseph was in the know from the very beginning. But it doesn't say that. It says she left town. And it doesn't say anything about Joseph in Luke. And then in Matthew we read about Joseph, and Joseph finds out somewhere in the story that his fiancée, his betrothed one, is pregnant, and it ain't by him. So in the little movie, she doesn't tell Joseph till after she comes back. Regardless, I bet there was a lot of hubbub about Joseph and Mary. I bet they had opportunities to be offended. I bet they had opportunities to really be offended. Because you know the old story, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. I don't know who made that up. I actually looked into that. The first time it was recorded, it was in 1862. Nobody knows where it came from. But you know what? It's a lie. No, words won't break your bones, and they won't send you to the hospital, but they'll do just as much or maybe even more damage to your soul. So when you choose when you let the offenses hit you and hit you in the heart, they're powerful. They can hurt you deeply, deeply. Sometimes it's the things that are said, sometimes the things that are not said can hurt you deeply. So they had choices to make about being offended, and if we go through their journey, it's obvious to me that they chose not to be offended. Now, Pastor Mary and I have a little tiny car that we drive in the summertime only, and it has a little tiny trunk, and it's amazing. This woman is so amazing. We got to the point where we can go in that little car for 2 weeks at a time with that little tiny trunk. We can go on an airplane and go across the country, and she's only got a carry-on. That's amazing. It is. She's an awesome woman. But anyhow, we made a conscious choice one time when we were on vacation to not be offended. And I was talking with my sister, and she's been married for longer than we have, or just as long, about the same time. And years ago, when they first got married, she said they went on vacation, and they started having these little spits and spats. They were down in Florida, and hardly ever got to get away. And they get away finally, and they start in on these little fights that turn into bigger fights. And they made a choice. We're not going to deal with any of this stuff. We're going to enjoy our vacation until we get home. And then when they got home, they didn't remember any of them. It's like, what was the problem anyhow? So one of the questions that we need to ask ourselves, what difference does it make? Will it make a difference in an hour, a day, a week, 6 months, a year, 100 years? Will it really make a difference? Is it really worth carrying that bitterness? Is it really worth having conflict? Sometimes we just need to let it go. Sometimes we just need to say, Proverbs 19:11 says, a person's wisdom yields patience. It is to one's glory to overlook an offense. Now, I'm like, what? One's glory? So I looked it up in the New Living, and I like the New Living. It says the same thing, but it says it in the way that I would say it. Sensible people control their temper. Is that good? You could end right there. That's a message in itself. They earn respect by overlooking wrongs. You will be wronged. You will be offended. You'll have an occasion to take that and let it get in and cause you to have an offense. Sensible people control their temper, and you earn respect by overlooking wrongs. Now, I'm talking about little things here. I'm not talking about big things. I'm talking about things like when the car pulls out in front of you and then drives 40 in a 50. Happens to me all the time. Doesn't happen to you guys? Now, I don't even know this person, and I'm letting it offend me. It's like, it happens on occasion with people here in the church. Something will be said that kind of just hits you just wrong. Anybody ever have that happen here? No, really? I'm the only one. I don't believe it. I'll talk about new beginnings because they're not here and you are. There were times when people would be offended because somebody didn't say hello to somebody. I'm like, if you're offended because I don't say hello to you, please don't let it get into your heart. Come to me and say hello to me. Don't let these little things get to you. And by the way, it's not the same as pretending it didn't happen. It's just choosing to forgive. It's choosing to forgive ahead of time, understanding that these things are going to happen. People are going to say things. People are going to do things. Things are not going to go your way, and you're going to be confused. Maybe this skit was helpful in a way because the lack of communication, sometimes we're just not on the same page, and we get offended because, what in the world are you talking about? Can you imagine if you're the interviewer and you're asking these questions? Some of us would actually probably get angry. I wouldn't, because I'm perfect in every way. No. But these little things happen, don't they? Okay, now I need a little feedback here. Share with me, let's take three, the first three. Share with me a little thing that happened to you that you chose to overlook. Real brief, and you're going to have to shout it out, and you're not on the microphone, so I apologize for those that are watching online. But anybody? Anybody dare? No? Nobody's ever?
Somebody in my family made a bagel, and I had to give them all the last cream cheese in it.
Somebody in your family made a bagel, and you had to give up the cream cheese. Your bagel was in the toaster first, but they took the cream cheese. That's a good example, though, because that could, if you chose to, ruin your whole day. You what? You had butter. It's not the same, is it? You want to have a pity party? I'll come. That's a great example. But what could have happened was, and this does happen, especially in marriages, am I right? You took all the cream cheese. Now I'm mad, and I'm mad the rest of the day, the rest of the week, and then something else happens, and that just piles on. Instead of saying, it's just cream cheese, I can live with butter.
You assumed it was Kyle.
Pardon?
You assumed it was Kyle.
I didn't assume it was Kyle. I said especially in marriages. Actually, I had something happen to me last week, and it was beyond anybody's control. And I said out loud, I'm not going to let this ruin my day. But for 3 hours, I was grumpy. I mean, it was a tiny little thing. It made no difference whatsoever. I'll share with you what it was, because otherwise you're not going to get it. And this takes the place of the other two. So I show up. I'm driving school bus part-time, right? And I show up, and my bus is gone. Somebody else is driving my bus. It's not my bus. It belongs to the school district. It's not mine. But, it kind of upset my apple cart because now I don't know what bus I'm supposed to drive. So I have to walk all over the place, find somebody who tells me what to do because I don't know what to do. And I literally said out loud, I am not going to let this ruin my day. I was still grumpy at 10 o'clock in the morning. And that's just stupid. I'm sorry.
You found a bus.
Oh, I drove a bus. I didn't drive my bus. They're all the same, by the way. But anyhow, it was a good picture of me working into this message. It's like, why would something that little affect me at all? I mean, that's crazy. So anyhow, I did forgive and I moved on. I let it go. It took me a couple days. I even wrote my boss an email. Didn't I, Aaron? I mean, that's just crazy. Who does things like that? What difference does it make? With God's help, I'm getting over this. With God's help, I'm getting over those little things. With God's help, I'm not going to be offended if somebody eats the rest of the cream cheese or eats the last of the ice cream. That's even worse, isn't it? And you worked all day, you're going to go home and have a bowl of ice cream and it's gone? Or toaster strudels? I'll tell you what, you can have all the Pop-Tarts in the world, but don't touch my toaster strudel. With God's help, I'm getting over those things. I'm getting over, I'm not going to be easily offended by His grace, because life is too short and my calling is too high. And it does affect the way that I interact with other people when I'm walking in that place of being offended. Yeah. And it will happen. And if you didn't know this is a side note. The word offense in Greek is the word scandalon. And the word scandalon is we get the word scandal from it, but it's a trap stick is what it literally means. And if you ever watch any of those survival shows where they got the rock with a little stick underneath it, and the critter comes and bites onto whatever, boom, and it squishes them. That's a scandalon. That stick is called the trap stick. That's what that word means. So when something happens, somebody eats your cream cheese, it's a trap. And it's like if you bite on that, you know what's going to happen? It's not going to be good. So choose not to take the bait. Just choose. It's easy. Actually, once you get used to it, it's easy. And then every once in a while you slip up and get offended by dumb little things still. I'm getting over it. You going to get over it? Back when I worked for Cisco Foods, my boss used to tell me, drop it and move on. Because things happened that weren't fair. I don't like that sentence to this day, but it's good advice. Because you can't change some things. So just drop it and move on. I met with somebody back a few years ago that was offended, not in this church, but in another church. That happens, you know. And whether their offense was valid or not, I still don't know because I only heard parts and bits and pieces of the story. But my advice to him was, forgive. Drop it and move on. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. Drop it and move on. Release it. Forgive. Ephesians 4:2 says, always be humble and gentle, be patient with each other, making allowance for each other's faults because of your love. We're gonna mess up. I'm going to mess up with you. Sometimes I'm going to say something, do something, or not say something, and you have a choice to make. Will you be offended or not? Your choice. It's not intentional, trust me. I would never... My hope is not to drive people away from me or the gospel or the church. That's not why I'm here. But sometimes I say things that I shouldn't say. Sometimes I don't say things that I should say. So make allowance for me. Make allowance for others. In biblical terms, you could say give grace. Grace has been given to you. Give grace to others. Because you're not perfect, and neither am I. We're all going to have an occasion to cause others an opportunity to be offended. And as I studied this out, this is pretty interesting. We judge ourselves by our intentions. Isn't that true? My intentions are good. I can tell you my intentions here are to love each one of you and to encourage you and to come alongside you and lift you up and serve you. My intentions are good. Sometimes my actions don't line up with my intentions. I judge myself by my intentions. I want to see you do well. If you only knew my heart. But I judge everybody else by their actions. Like, you did that? I can't believe you did that. You said what? Without stopping to consider their intentions. I want others to give me the benefit of the doubt, so therefore, I have to give others the benefit of the doubt. I have to believe the best in them. That's what 1 Corinthians 13 love does, is believe the best about others. My life, I want you to say this with me. My life is too short and my calling too big to live offended. Do you believe that? I mean, your life is pretty short. It's like a vapor. As you get older, my grandmother always said this, and I'm experiencing it. The older you get, the faster time goes by. When you're a kid, it's like forever till Christmas. It's like Christmas never going to come. When you're an adult, it's every other week. It's like Christmas again. Winter lasts forever. It's like living in Narnia. I'm getting over being easily offended because life is too short and my calling is too high. I'm also getting over the big offenses. This is where it gets a little tougher because there's real hurts. There's massive betrayals, whether it's in your childhood, a parent or a guardian, and somebody did something, said something, abused you some way or whatever. In your marriage, maybe your spouse cheated on you or left you, abandoned you. Whatever it is, I understand it's tough. But I also understand that the key to getting through it is to forgive, not to harbor bitterness and resentment. You know, I read these stories like Leo Zampini. What was his name? The movie or the book Broken. And here's a man who was imprisoned. Pardon? Zapparini. A man who was imprisoned by the Japanese in World War II. He gives his life to Christ at a Billy Graham deal back in the 50s. And he goes to Japan and forgives not just the people, but the person who tortured him and abused him. That's the power of the gospel. That sets you free. Holding it in will destroy you. If you ever watch the news and they have families that come on when something horrific has happened to a loved one, and I'm not judging, because I don't know how I would respond if something happened to one of my loved ones at the hand of another. But it's so powerful when you get to watch the forgiveness happen, because it does. And it's so hard for me to watch when the opposite happens. They deserve this. Yeah, they do. But forgive. You can release it or you can rehearse it. You can release it or you can rehearse it. It's your choice. Are you going to rehearse all this stuff? And it's interesting to me because I was a rehearser. I was one who would, the word says to meditate on these things which are pure and lovely and noble and all of those things. Not me. I'm not thinking the best about people. When I'm thinking on things, I'm meditating. I can't believe Heather. And the longer it goes on, the worse it gets. And next thing you know, I hate this person. I don't hate you, Heather. I just used your name because you're sitting there in the front row, looking beautiful in your ugly sweater with your cat. I was one of those people who would just rehearse it over and over. You know, the things that my dad did and didn't do. I'd rehearse it over and over. And I'd think about it and I'd meditate on it and I'd stew in it. And it just made me bitter and angry and resentful. And it's like, no life there. Just a downward spiral. Now, because God has changed me from the inside out, I don't meditate on the things my father did to me or didn't do to me. They're still there. They're still very real. And they affected my life. However, I choose to honor him. I've forgiven him. I have nothing against him at all. I absolutely miss him and have regrets that I didn't approach him sooner and do more for our relationship earlier. He died 8 years ago. I don't rehearse those things. I've released all of them. And when you release those things, you know what starts to happen? I start to get free, and I start to understand, not excusing, not saying everything was okay and it's all right, but beginning to understand that my father had a father. What was his life when he was a kid? What happened to him? And again, not to excuse anything, but begin to understand that those things are very real and they hurt him and damaged him, and he did the very best he could with what he had. When I start to look at his intentions versus his actions, wow, because I know his intentions were right. Who among us wants to have kids and treat them awful and hurt them and damage them? Release it. I don't care if it's your spouse, your ex-spouse, your parents, your coach, your teachers. I don't care who it is. Release it, because that's where freedom is for you. Make allowance for each other's faults and forgive anyone who offends you. Anyone. Yes, anyone. No matter what the offense is, the key for you is to forgive. And you want to read something really scary? Open your Bible, if you've got your Bible, Matthew 18. And I know many of us Christians like to quote Matthew 18 because that's the place where we talk about, if somebody's offended you, you go to them. And if nothing happens, you bring somebody with you. And if nothing happens then you bring the elders with you. And if nothing happens then, you tell it to the church. The other part we like to quote is, this is in Matthew 18, by the way, where two or more are gathered in my name, there I shall be also. Isn't it interesting that it's sandwiched between this discipline thing and this forgiving thing? Matthew 18 is not a church discipline passage. Matthew 18 is a personal reconciliation passage. It's not about church discipline. It's about reconciling between you and a brother or sister, a friend or a relative. Go to them. The key is forgiveness, though. Matthew 18. He's in here somewhere. There's Matthew 21, 18. And if you go all the way down to verse 21. So this is after correcting another believer, after you've straightened everybody else out. Peter came to Jesus and said, Lord, how often should I forgive someone who sins against me? 7 times? That's pretty generous, isn't it? Jesus replies, no, not 7 times, but 70 times 7. In other words, without end. You keep forgiving, you keep forgiving, you keep forgiving, because your unforgiveness isn't hurting that person, it's hurting you. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven can be compared to a king who decided to bring his accounts up to date with servants who had borrowed money from him. In the process, one of the debtors was brought in who owed him millions of dollars. He couldn't pay, so the master ordered that he be sold along with his wife, his children, everything he owned to pay the debt. But the man fell down before his master and begged him, please be patient with me, I will pay it all. Then the master was filled with pity for him and released him and forgave his debt. So if that happened to you, what would you do? I'd have a party. It's like, dude. But not this guy. When the man left the king, he went to a fellow servant who owed him a few $1,000s. He grabbed him by the throat and demanded instant payment. His fellow servant fell down before him and begged for a little more time. Be patient with me and I will repay. We heard that, didn't we? But his creditor wouldn't wait. He had the man arrested and put in prison until the debt could be paid in full. When some of the other servants saw this, they were upset. They went to the king and told him everything that happened. Then the king called in the man who had forgiven tremendous debt because he pleaded with him, shouldn't you have had mercy on the fellow servant just as I had mercy on you? Then the angry king sent the man to prison to be tortured until he paid his entire debt. That's what my heavenly Father will do if you refuse to forgive your brothers and sisters from your heart. Did you hear that? When you don't forgive, you're blocking his forgiveness. It has to go through you. I've been forgiven much. I have been forgiven so much. How can I hold anything against you? I can't. I've got to let it go. I've got to let it go. I'm commanded to let it go, and the implication if I don't let it go is very serious for me. Not for you. God's going to deal with you. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, and he will repay. He'll deal with you. I need to let it go. Forgiving doesn't excuse what happened, ever. Doesn't make excuses. It doesn't take the weight of it away. It just releases it into God's hands instead of yours. Forgiveness frees you. Forgiveness frees you. Let me read you a story about a dead duck. This is by Richard Hoffler in a book entitled Will Daylight Come? So a little boy was visiting his grandparents and was given his first slingshot. Grandparents, don't give your grandkids a slingshot or a BB gun. They could take an eye out with that thing. I think Alex is almost old enough for a BB gun. Lookout windows. He practiced in the woods, but he could never hit his target. As he came back to Grandma's backyard, he spied her pet duck. On impulse, he took aim and let it fly. The stone hit, and the duck fell dead. The boy panicked. Desperately, he hid the duck in the woodpile. only to look up and see his sister watching. Sally had seen it all and said nothing. After lunch that day, Grandma said, "Sally, let's wash the dishes." But Sally said, "Johnny told me he wanted to help in the kitchen today. Didn't you, Johnny?" And she whispered to him, "Remember the duck." Johnny did the dishes. Later, Grandpa asked if the children wanted to go fishing. Grandma said, "I'm sorry, but I need Sally to help make supper." Sally smiled and said, "That's all taken care of. Johnny wants to do it." Again, she whispered, "Remember the duck." Johnny stayed, and Sally went fishing. After several days of Johnny doing both his chores and Sally's, finally he couldn't stand it. He confessed to Grandma that he killed her duck. And she said, "I know, Johnny." She said, giving him a big hug, "I was standing at the window and saw the whole thing. Because I love you, I forgive you. I wondered how long you would let Sally make a slave of you." That's what unforgiveness does. It makes you a slave. Now, it may not be your big sister, but you have a very real enemy, and you also have the reality of the bitterness and the anger and the resentment that just will continue to tear you up and tear you up and tear you up. Let it go. How long will you be a slave when you can be free? Be forgiven and be free. Forgive and be free. So I just want to tell you, because I don't know you all here, and even those that I assume are good to go and they're right with God, I don't know that as a fact. But here's the reality. We celebrated communion, and communion and baptism are those two things that really paint a picture of what Jesus did for us. So on the night that he was betrayed, he said, "Look, this is the new covenant. I'm going to sacrifice my body. I'm going to shed my blood because I'm going to take the place of all these animal sacrifices. You put your faith and your trust in me, and you have right relationship with God." That's amazing. And then baptism that we're going to take part in just a little bit, we do what's called believer's baptism. We don't baptize infants. We believe that it's biblical. It's the practice we find in the New Testament, where believers, people who have come to Christ, have given their lives to Him, then say, "I want to be baptized. I need to be baptized." And it's a proclamation. It's more than just a symbol. It's a proclamation to the world, to the enemy, to the church, that I have given my life to Jesus Christ. I have died, and I'm being raised again in Him, into the body of Christ. That's different than a little sprinkling and this covenant stuff going on. This is pretty simple stuff. This is the picture of what happened to me when I gave my life to Christ. I literally died. It's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. So if you've not experienced that, if you don't know what I'm talking about, let today be the day for you to walk into that place of forgiveness. Let's just pray and pray with me. And by the way, we had somebody last week pray that prayer for the first time. And are you getting baptized today? Where are you? Yes? No? Did you decide to? Yes. Matt became our brother in Christ last week, Pam's son. And I'm so excited to see, that's the biblical. You don't have to go to class. You don't have to take a theology degree course and all of this stuff to get baptized. Because we see in the New Testament, when Philip got translated down and he introduced the Ethiopian to Jesus Christ, and he gave his life, his heart and his life to Jesus, as Matt did last week. Then he says to Stephen, to Philip, "Why can't I get baptized? There's some water right there." And he was baptized. So it's not really this big complex thing. It's not a religious thing. It's a spiritual thing. It's a reality thing. It's an obedience thing. And if you've not yet been baptized, I don't know if today might not work out for you because the ride home might be a little cold if you go home in wet clothes. So if you're not prepared today, I guess that's up to you. But anyhow, these two things are so weighty. Let's pray. And for those that maybe have never been there, and if you have been, pray for those around you. Father, we come to you. I come to you. And again, I gave my life to you so many years ago, but again today, I give my life to you. I surrender to you. I lay it all down. I say, I am yours. And I put my faith and my trust in you, for not just for my eternity, but for my life today. I ask you to forgive me and cleanse me of all of my sins. And I ask you to fill me with your Holy Spirit so that I could live in a way that brings glory and honor to you. I ask you to change me from the inside out And I ask you to help me to learn and to grow and understand who you are and who I am in you. And as I do that, God, I thank you for your forgiveness. And help me to extend forgiveness to others, that they might be free, I might be free, and that they might encounter you even as I forgive.